Have you ever wondered how something as simple as oxygen can transform your healing journey? Today, I sit down with Brad Pitzele, founder of 1000 Roads. After being diagnosed with metastatic melanoma and multiple autoimmune conditions, Brad discovered exercise with oxygen therapy and restored his health. Now he's made this powerful healing tool accessible for home use, helping thousands of others on their healing journeys. You'll learn how just 15 minutes of exercise with oxygen can match the benefits of a 90-minute hyperbaric oxygen session, plus why leading cancer centers are incorporating oxygen therapy into their treatment protocols. Brad breaks down the science behind why oxygen matters for healing and how it can enhance both conventional and natural treatment approaches. Stay until the end to hear about the impact of oxygen therapy has on athletic endurance and brain function. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Born to Heal podcast, where we talk about holistic healing options for healing cancer. And today, I'm excited to be speaking with Brad Pitzele. Brad, thank you, and thank you for coming on the show, and welcome.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
So, Brad, you have an interesting story, and today we're going to be talking about exercise with oxygen, but I would love to have you talk to us a little bit about how you came into this and why you're so passionate and interested in this topic.
Excellent. Thank you, Katie. So throughout my life, I had a variety of very strange autoimmune and symptoms that would kind of come and go. Things started to get serious when I started to have arthritis in 2011 and 12, and it progressed. I also had weird symptoms. I started to get precancerous, I had Barrett's esophagus in my throat, which is a precancerous condition. At the age of 25, I started getting polyps, which is very young for someone to get colon polyps. Luckily, they were discovered. But then I started taking medicines for my autoimmune disease, immune modulators. And then in 2000, I was diagnosed with metastatic melanoma on my shoulder. I knew that the medications I was taking increased the risk of melanoma. And so immediately I was quite frightened. And I went to my rheumatologist and said, well, geez, I'm kind of in a bind here. On the one hand, if I don't take these medications, my life's going to be cut short from these autoimmune diseases. And if I do take them, I've already gotten cancer once. I kind of feel like I'm playing Russian roulette here. And so we tried a couple other drugs, but I was very nervous the whole time. And I started to kind of research and try to take ownership of my health. And I tried a variety of different things, but my health was declining quite rapidly. And in 2000, I moved and I got a new doctor. And about 2016, he said, look, you're in really bad shape. I recommend you either do hyperbaric oxygen or you do this thing called exercise with oxygen therapy. And I'd never heard of it. So first I looked into hyperbaric because it was something I'd heard of, and it was going to be somewhere between $50,000 and $75,000. It was going into a doctor's office 7 days a week, and it involved going into a pressurized tube for 90 minutes. And I just thought, I don't have that kind of money, and I certainly don't have the 3 hours to drive and go into this tube and pressurize it and spend 90 minutes and so forth. And so that just wasn't realistic for me. So then I started to look at exercise with oxygen therapy, otherwise known as EWOT, EWOT. And there were several providers, and they were offering it for anywhere between maybe $5,000 on the low end and $25,000 on the high end. And I didn't really trust their marketing literature. It didn't feel very honest to me. So I was really afraid to put that kind of money on the line. And so I actually ended up making my own. And sure enough, I started to get better. A lot of my symptoms started to go away. And in about a year, I went and saw my doctor in 2017. And he noticed I'd taken a big stepwise improvement. And he said to me, Brad, what are you doing? Are you doing the oxygen? And I said, I am. And he says, that's great. Who did you buy it from so I can tell my other patients? And I looked him in the eye and I said, actually, I just made my own, doctor. And he looked at me kind of shocked and he said, really? He said, would you consider making it for our patients? And that was kind of the birth of 1000 Roads, with the thought being having a lot of empathy for people with chronic illness. A lot of times when you step outside of mainstream medical, there's a lot of folks who have a $5,000 or $10,000, $25,000 answer for you. And, there's like only so many of those big bets you can take, if any at all. And I just felt like if we brought down this price, we could make this much more affordable and get people's hands on it. And it's really powerful. But what makes it powerful is when you can do it consistently over time, and having something in your home really made sense. So what exercise with oxygen therapy really involves is just doing a 15-minute cardio session with a mask on your face, breathing near pure oxygen. So I didn't have to spend 90 minutes in a tube. I could just do 15 minutes. I just set the system up in my garage, and anyone can find 15 minutes, but finding 90 minutes or several hours every day, it's just not sustainable, even if you do have the funds. And so that really became kind of a rallying point for us, is how do we bring down the price of exercise with oxygen so more people can experience it and bring it into their home. And so we've been, that was the birth in 2018, and we've been around since then and steadily growing. And it's kind of an exciting thing to be able to give back to folks who are dealing with chronic health issues and help them recover their health.
Well, I love that. And also, I personally I did exercise with oxygen. I haven't been doing it for the past 2 years, but I had joined a wellness center that had Superhuman, which basically is the combination of PEMF and then exercise with oxygen and red light. So I have experience with doing this and really noticed a difference with doing those practices in my own wellness journey. And that was really the start of me exploring some of these alternative options for, natural healing and just supporting the wellness of our body. So I love your story. And I also love this making something that is so expensive, accessible, because you hit the nail on the head. This is like a space, especially most of my listeners are people who are interested in healing cancer, maybe not have cancer themselves, but have an interest in that area. And it's so overwhelming because there's so many things that you need to do. It's not just one thing that someone needs to do to heal cancer. Cancer doesn't develop overnight, and it's not just one thing that's gone wrong. There's multiple things. And so the oxygen piece is one piece, and I have a lot of people who do hyperbaric, but it's very expensive, like you described, also very time intensive. And I love this short option, and knowing, in my center where we did it, it was, I think, 10 minutes to exercise with oxygen, but 15 minutes, people have that, that's
right.
And I think this is one of the things that this week alone, actually, I heard from multiple clients where they were just like, the plan that my doctor has me on, it was a holistic naturopathic oncologist. She's like, I can't sustain this. Like, literally, my protocol for healing has me busy from like 7 a.m. until 6 p.m. And so any way that we can simplify and reduce the time that's required to do the, whatever interventions that you're doing, and then also make them affordable and accessible, I think is really critical. And it's part of the solution, is like, it's not just one thing. So we need to find ways to bring all of these different pieces in. So I really just love what you're doing. And I want to talk a little bit about oxygen. Like, why oxygen? Why is this important with healing your body? And also specifically with cancer, kind of tying that piece in with oxygen.
Absolutely. That's a really good question. It's going to be somewhat of a surprising answer for a lot of folks out there. But going back to as early as the 1920s, a Nobel Prize winner, Otto Warburg, discovered that if he took a regular cell and he deprived it of oxygen, he could turn it into a cancerous cell. And so that's a pretty powerful thing. And there's a ton of research on this. People continue to study how cells behave when they don't get enough oxygen. The medical term for that is hypoxia. It just means oxygen starvation. So in 2019, another Nobel Prize was given out to a bunch of scientists studying how cells behave in a hypoxic situation. So a lot of research on that. Now, the research is pretty clear. If you look anywhere in the body, where you have oxygen starvation, the body has natural compensatory changes. It does things to try to bring itself back into balance. And one of those chemicals it produces is something called hypoxic inducible factor. And simply what that means is the body recognizes it's low in oxygen. And so it creates this chemical that creates a cascade of physiological changes in our body to try to bring us back to balance. And one of those things it does is it increases the growth of new blood vessels. Without going into all the science, it says, hey, I'm not getting enough oxygen here. I need to get better blood supply here. Now, what cancer does is it survives in this low oxygen environment because cancer doesn't like energy production that uses oxygen. That's called aerobic respiration. That's when we use oxygen to create ATP in our mitochondria, which is the basic energy source our body uses. It likes anaerobic respiration. And so anaerobic is when it just burns glucose and it puts out all of these lactic acids and toxic byproducts into our body. Our cells go into a lower energy state and it kind of toxifies that part of the body. And that toxin load actually helps to protect the cancer. And then the body tries to bring in new blood vessels to reestablish oxygen and it hijacks it. And it uses that to metastasize to other parts of the body. So when we reestablish good oxygenation to those parts of the body, we turn off the inflammation that's going on there that the cancer is helping feed on, and we turn off that superhighway of metastasis that allows it to spread out to other parts of the body. So, and oxygen works great. If you're going an alternate health route, oxygen works great. We have a lot of folks using it and using it for alternate cancer treatment. Even if you're doing chemotherapy or radiation, the research is really clear. The survival rate of people who are using chemo and radiation is directly correlated to how much oxygen is in that tumor. And the reason is those agents are what are called ox agents. They utilize the oxygen to kill the cancer. And when they don't have oxygen, they can't kill the cancer and the cancer can resist. So oxygen is kind of like a mortal enemy of cancer. And when we can reestablish, people will start to notice benefits from it. You'll turn off, like I said, all that blood vessel growth that they use to metastasize. You weaken the cancer cells. You tamp down on the inflammation. People are using EWOT for all those things. And there's not a lot of folks in America, I say, who can't benefit from EWOT because we all in Western America are living in very inflammatory kind of environments due to our diets and our environment. And the research just simply shows anywhere in your body you have low oxygen, you have inflammation. And anywhere you have inflammation, you have low oxygen. Those are just two sides of the same coin. So when you reestablish normal oxygen, you are quenching that inflammation and all of the ill effects that come from that, whether that be cancer or many of the other issues that we commonly face in Western society. So, and like you were saying, for me, when I was trying to get better, I was kind of smiling when you were talking about how this person was working from 6 a.m. till 9 at night. I referred to it as the ceremonies. There's all these ceremonies that you're trying to get better, whether it's counting pills or whether it's going in a sauna or whether it's doing this or that. And each one of them is like, oh, it's only 20 minutes. Oh, it's only a half hour. It's only a little time. But then you add them up and you're like, man, I can feel better for like 10 minutes a day, but that's all I have. And so then it becomes unsustainable, to your point. And it's like you do it, you go hard for a month and then you're like, I'm out. I can't do this, especially for folks who are still working or they have a family to take care of. But the great thing about EWOT is it does so many things. It helps detoxify our bodies. So 70% of the detoxification your body does actually happens through your lungs. And when you're giving yourself more oxygen and more energy, you're able to better detox. We talked about earlier a little bit about anaerobic respiration. So the cancer causes you to burn glucose and that creates lactic acid and an acidic environment and all these metabolic waste products. Well, because the cell is in a lower energy state than if it were using aerobic respiration with oxygen, it doesn't do all of the essential functions. And some of the things it stops doing is taking out the trash. These metabolic waste products just build up inside the cell walls. Well, when we establish oxygen back to that cell, and it can generate that APT and all the energy that it needs to optimize itself, then it starts taking out all those metabolic waste products and flushing through the system. And oxygen is very, very powerful in helping get rid of toxins in our body because it oxidizes. And what that effectively means is it creates a chemical reaction that breaks those things down so that our kidneys and our liver and our elimination organs can get it out of the body. Oxygen helps give you more energy. So when your cells are fully energized, not only do you feel energized, but each one of your organs, each one of your cells can do what it's meant to do at its best. And so then your whole body is performing in a way that's much at a higher level than it could otherwise. Other symptoms people are using for cancer with EWOT is things like brain fog. Brain fog is generally caused by toxins and inflammation in the brain. And that can be simply low energy in the brain. And so all that lactic acid is building up, or it can be things like chemo brain, or it can just be general inflammation from a variety of sources. But one of the things EWOT is great for is helping clear out your brain and improve your memory and giving your brain that energy it needs so that you can think and function smoothly. And that was a big one for me in my recovery journey. And then, of course, we talked about inflammation, pain. And the last one I'll say is oxygen is great for boosting your immune system. On its own, oxygen is great. Now, the great thing about EWOT is you're getting a 2-for-1. If you were doing hyperbaric, you're laying on your back in a tube and you're breathing that oxygen. Now, if you rewind the clock 20 years ago, they told you, oh, you have cancer, we're treating you, rest and save your energy. They now have turned a corner on that and they recognize, no, you actually need to exercise. And that makes sense. Exercise helps boost your immune system. Exercise helps bring more oxygen into your body. Exercise helps you produce more energy. It does a lot of great things for you, and those great things you need during cancer treatment as well. Now, what we're doing is we're getting a 2-for-1. So you're getting the benefits of both, but it's a synergistic effect. It's a 1 + 1 = 3 kind of effect, because when you're exercising, your body is primed to take in this oxygen. You're breathing deeper and faster. Your heart is beating faster. Your blood vessels are dilating. So if you think about your circulatory system, at the very end of your circulatory system are your capillaries. These are very thin blood vessels, thinner than a human hair. And so any inflammation you have in there can actually cause them to swell shut and cause downstream cells not to get any oxygen. And when you do EWOT, we have this vasodilation, which allows oxygen through there in the immediate term. And then that oxygen creates that anti-inflammatory effect I was talking about to reestablish normal blood flow in those capillaries. So we're kind of hijacking all of the physiological benefits of exercise to drive more oxygen into your body deeper and more quickly. And so if you were to compare it to hyperbaric, there's 2 flavors of hyperbaric. There's the soft shell chambers you see athletes doing at home. And those go up to like 1.3 atmospheres, which basically means 30% more pressure than you would feel at sea level. Or you go into a doctor's office, and those are what are called hard shell hyperbaric chambers. And they generally run at about 2.3 atmospheres, which means 130% more pressure than you'd feel at sea level. And in about 90 minutes in one of those, you might get about the same amount of oxygen as you get when you're doing a 15-minute EWOT session. So we're able to give you similar benefits, except that we're also taking advantage of all of those exercise benefits as well, which have their direct benefits, but they also benefit bringing the oxygen in deeper. So it's a pretty cool modality, and not too many people know about it, although it's becoming much more well known in the cancer, in the Alzheimer community, and chronic illness community.
Yeah, well, and that's why I'm excited to be talking to you, because so many people know about hyperbaric, but don't necessarily know about exercise with oxygen. And, you bring up some interesting things, because as a radiation oncologist, when I was practicing radiation oncology, we would always I specialize in breast cancer, tell the women to exercise during radiation, because there's clear data showing that women who exercise during radiation have better outcomes, meaning lower risk of recurrence, but then also fewer side effects related to the treatment. And then we have data around the oxygen, and basically you described it in there beautifully. The mechanism of why this is that the treatments, chemo and radiation, both require oxygen for damage of the cancer cells. And so what I love about this is you're bringing, like you said, it's a 2-for-1. These are two things that actually people need to be doing to get the best results with those treatments. And it's short, it's not even like this really rigorous, very long, endeavor that they have to participate in. One question that I have for you is, and this I think many listeners may wonder about, is what is the intensity? Does this need to be like super intense 15 minutes, or what is it that they're doing in those 15 minutes? And what types of exercise can they do while they're wearing oxygen?
It's a great question. So here's my experience with EWOT. I discovered that I saw incremental benefits from it into my third year, which shocks me even telling folks that. You would think you would plateau after 6 months of any kind of exercise regimen. So the power in EWOT is being able to do it over a long span of time. So when it comes to exercise equipment, I always tell people the most important factors, pick something you're most comfortable with. If you want to do a rowing machine, that's fine. Elliptical machine, I love elliptical machines. They're low impact. But if you want to do a treadmill, you want to do an exercise bike, those are all fine. Any kind of stationary exercise equipment will work wonderfully with EWOT. And so you pick the one that you can do. As far as intensity goes, I always tell folks, ideally, you want to get up to 70 to 80% of your theoretical max heart rate. And the way you calculate that is you just take the number 220 and you subtract your age, and that's your theoretical 100% max heart rate. So you multiply that by either 70 or 80%, and that's the range we want to get up to eventually. However, what I do tell folks is perfection is the enemy of progress. And so you don't need to do that on day one. On day one, you just want to get on there and do what you're comfortable with. One of the cool things about exercise with oxygen, one of the side effects, if you will, that I noticed was my athletic endurance improved incredibly. I have ridiculous endurance, and I'll give you an example of what this looks like. So when I started exercising with oxygen therapy, I already had pretty good endurance. I had this commercial grade elliptical machine that had 20 levels of resistance on it. And I would do it at a level 12. And most people would use it from time to time. They tell me 12 is pretty rigorous. But then I started breathing the oxygen. And when I was doing it at 12, I wasn't getting the workout. I was like, this is too easy. So I had to move it up to 13 and 14. And for a while it went up. And today I do it at a 17 out of 20. Now, I am not huffing and puffing any harder than when I did at 12. Oftentimes I read a magazine while I'm doing it, but it just improves your endurance. So we don't get ourselves down on the fact that we may not get to 70 or 80% initially. We have folks doing it who can only walk on a treadmill or bounce on a reap, and that's okay. They come back and in 3 months they're doing more, and that their endurance is improving more and more over time.
Absolutely. Well, I always say that's like one of the things that I say, it's progress over perfection. If you're shooting for perfection doesn't exist, and certainly not in this category. And if you're shooting for that, then you often feel disappointed. So it's literally about getting started where you're at. And a lot of people, if they don't feel well, it's like just walking and just basically or a rebounder is a great example. I love that you gave that one. But I think that it is really important for people to realize that you can get benefit of this, even just starting at the lower intensity and then working your way up. And I loved how you shared that using the oxygen with the exercise actually improves your exercise performance. So people will naturally, if they're consistent, and really consistency is the key to healing. That's right. Literally, it's like, how consistent can you be? So rather than choosing to do, 10 things, it's like, choose the things that you actually can do and be consistent with. That's the most important. And so actually, how many times a week would someone do this to get benefit?
So again, the ideal state would be somewhere between 3 and 5 times a week. I always say at least 1 day or 2 off, because it's exercise and your body needs some time to rest and regenerate from that. Now, there's some folks who have cancer but are in incredible shape and they'll do it 7 days a week. I actually know of some alternate cancer centers out on the west end of the country who are recommending doing it 3 times a day. I think that's overkill. I don't think you need that. If you can get yourself to do it 3 to 5 times a week, you're going to see great benefits. But again, we have folks who can't get up to 3 yet, and they start out and they do it once a week, and then they come back the next week and do it once, and they're doing it, and then they eventually make it up to 2. And as they start to feel that it's giving them energy and it's helping, they clear their brain fog and there's less pain, then they feel motivated and they can do more, and that's okay. Again, what you can't do when you're trying to recover from a chronic illness like this is mentally beat yourself up for not being able to do everything you want to do. That's part of it, is accepting where you are and taking small steps to get yourself out of the canyon, so to speak.
Absolutely. And so, I think you just answered my next question was, is there too much? Is there too much of doing this? But sounds like no, that if some places are doing it 3 times a day, then I'd say that's crazy. Like, I would never recommend for my clients to do that just because of commitment of all the things that they're doing, for the thing that we talked about at the beginning of just being overwhelmed with things to do. So there's really no risk of not doing too much of this. Are there people who should not use exercise with oxygen?
Yes. The primarily I'd say that group is anyone who's not healthy enough to exercise. If you're not healthy enough to exercise, obviously this is not the right thing for you. You may want to start thinking about doing some hyperbaric, and as your health status improves, you can look at this. But that's the main thing. So there is a general risk with oxygen. There's something called oxygen toxicity. So if you're a scuba diver and you go diving underwater under great pressures and you're breathing pure oxygen, eventually you can have too much oxygen in your bloodstream and it gets trapped in there. And that's a problem for folks. The great thing about EWOT is you can't get oxygen toxicity. And there's 2 reasons you can't do it. One is the system is set up so that it can only deliver 1,000 liters of oxygen effectively. After that, you need to refill the system, and then it takes time. So that time caps it well before you could have that issue. And by the time it's filled again, any risk goes away. But the second and more effective reason why you can't, even if you could do it continuously all day, is when you're exercising, your body produces a massive amount of carbon dioxide. And that carbon dioxide gas in your blood actually forces the oxygen out of it. And so it works as a protector of any kind of risks of oxygen toxicity, which is also what makes this an amazing modality, is that it's a way that we can make oxygen inherently safe at home because of the exercise.
Yeah, well, and that's the piece with the hyperbaric, why the soft shell ones, they're lower, and you have to go into a doctor's office to get those hard shell, higher pressure machines. So I think that's really important, and I think helpful for people to know. And, I loved how you described that exercise with oxygen not only gives us something that our body needs, which is oxygen, and also the exercise, the benefits of that, but it also helps with detoxification. Because on this podcast, I've talked a lot about that. I think the problem with cancer is really too much toxicity in the body. and not enough nourishment. And we've got this kind of imbalance, and we want to bring down the toxicity and bring up your nourishment. That's actually how we heal. And so this modality is such a good example of something that's doing both of those things at the same time to help with the healing process.
Anything, like you said, I call it the ceremonies, when you have to do all these things. Okay, I got to take these nutrients and these pills, and I got to eat this way, and I got to try all these other things. It becomes overwhelming. But if you have something, you were talking at the beginning about all these various modalities you tried. We find that folks who try a variety of these different modalities, they always come back to us and tell us that EWOT's their favorite because it gives them all of these different benefits: the anti-inflammation, the detoxification, the energy, et cetera, et cetera. And it's all happening simultaneously in 15 minutes, which is really manageable, right? We can all, even if your day is packed, you can wake up 15 minutes earlier if you had to get something like this in. So that's the magic of it, particularly when you can do it in your own home. I mean, if you go to a center and do it, it's still only 15 minutes, but it's a half-hour drive there and back, and you're waiting. And so that was kind of the goal, is like, hey, how do we get this out of like cryo and chiropractor clinics and into people's homes where they can do it?
Yeah. Well, and that was the reason why I ended up stopping going to the place that I was going, is because once I started my practice, I couldn't take that. It was an hour, in the center, and then it's, whatever, 30 minutes to like get there and get settled and come home. So it's 2 hours out of your day. That's why I stopped going to that center, was because it was just too much time out of my day. And I now am seeing my next purchase of my home equipment, because the exercise with oxygen is the one thing that I haven't bought for home yet. So I've got my sauna, I've got my red light, I got my PEMF, and the exercise with oxygen, though, I loved it because it was super easy and I felt great. So tell us, how much does a unit cost? Like, what is the investment for someone to purchase this for home?
We have 2 units. We have a 10 liter per minute system and a 5 liter per minute system. So the most expensive system, 10 liters per minute, is $22.99. And the less expensive unit is $16.99. They will both give you the full EWOT benefits. So it's not like EWOT and EWOT Light. The big difference is what you have to do is, so when you're doing cardiovascular exercise, your body can easily consume 50 or 60 liters of oxygen per minute. But the commercially available oxygen generation equipment is only 5 or 10 liters. So you would need to buy 5 or 6 of these machines, try to plug them in. It's not economical. It's not realistic. No one wants to have 10 machines sitting around their house. So what we do is we use one of these machines to fill a 1,000-liter reservoir. So this reservoir is 6 feet wide, about 5.5 feet tall. And when it's fully filled, it's probably 2.5 or 3 feet thick. So it's a big 1,000-liter reservoir. And the 10-liter machine will fill it in about 90 minutes. And the 5-liter machine will fill it in about 3 hours. So it's an economy model for a lot of folks who are, hey, you're chronically ill, you don't have a job in many cases, or you can't, and you're spending a lot on this stuff. So it was a way to help people get into it.
And if someone's using it once a day, if it takes 3 hours to fill it, it's fine. It's like, even if you were using it 3 times a day, you probably could do the 5-liter unit. Is that correct? Because basically you just need 3 hours in between. That's
right. So the thing is, where we definitely recommend the 10 liters, like if you have multiple people who are using it in a house, oftentimes, the spouse and the children want to use it. A 10 liter is going to be more realistic. You can get away with a 5, but to your point, then it's like everyone's got to have a time slot. But usually people want to get this done early in the day. And so like having quicker recovery of that reservoir matters. But the other thing we do is, I always joke, we should have gone bankrupt day one, because not only are we asking Americans to exercise, we're asking them to pre-plan their exercise by several hours. So that's a total multiple strikeout against us. So when we designed the product to try to help folks, our concentrators, the equipment that fills the oxygen, are designed to be used with a digital outlet timer like you would use for your Christmas lights. So you actually leave the machines on switch on all the time, and you get a $10 either smart outlet or timer that you can use with it. and schedule it. So if you want to use the 5-liter machine at 7 in the morning, you set that timer 3 hours before at 4 in the morning to turn it on, and you get up at 7 and it's ready for you. Because we want to make this, the goal is to make this as convenient as possible for you. Now, if your spouse wants to use it, we recommend, hey, you get the 10-liter, you leave it running while you're using it so you deplete the reservoir less. And then after you get off, they might be able to get on it in 30 or 45 minutes versus maybe waiting an hour and a half with the 5-liter system. So that's really the difference between them, but they both will give you all the wonderful benefits of EWOT.
Well, you just gave me an idea for my sauna, because one of the biggest problems that I have with my sauna is you have to come down and turn it on. And it's like, I want to use it first thing in the morning, but it's like, then I have to come down, turn it on and wait. And so I don't know if I could do that with my sauna, but actually I love that you thought of this, because it is a realistic challenge of people, having something that requires some, in this case, filling, I don't know what the right terminology is for filling. Yeah, filling the reservoir. When you have that can be challenging. So you're right that that does from the day one sounds like that would be like a no-go, but I love that solution.
It's a small but important feature. And our goal is to make everything as convenient as possible. For instance, our mask, when you get the mask the first time, it's got a 5-way adjustable Velcro strap. And so you're pulling these straps to get it to fit snugly and just right so it's comfortable for you. And after that, it's got a clip so you can clip in and out. Because if you have to spend 3 minutes every day fiddling, it doesn't feel as good as it did yesterday, then you're that's just friction. And that's why we also recommend, if you have multiple users, you want to generally get your own mask, not only because it's very personal, you're sweating in it and such, but it's convenience. We're trying to take all of that friction out. And if we can just take this thing down to, hey, it's ready when you want it and it's 15 minutes, there's so much benefit so many people are getting out of it.
Well, I just have to say that I'm so grateful that the doctor that you were seeing at that time when you first made your own machine was open and said, hey, can you do this for us? Because I think what you've created is incredible in terms of the accessibility and really something that's of value. If you would like to know more about 1000 Roads and exercise with oxygen therapy, you can check out their link in our show notes and learn more about their products there. So Brad, I want to thank you. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for sharing your expertise in such a simple and accessible way, because I really think that you broke this down in a way that I think makes it easy for people to understand how this could benefit not only people who are healing cancer, but really anyone who wants to be healthier and stay well. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Katie. I really appreciate it.
I want nothing more than to share this valuable information with as many people as possible, and you can help us in that effort. If you know of someone that would enjoy this, would appreciate the content, please share, and we'll see you next week. Take care. Thank you for joining me on Born to Heal. It's been a privilege to share this time with you, and I hope that today's episode has offered you valuable insights on your journey toward optimal health. Please consider subscribing, sharing this podcast with your friends, and leaving us a review. To learn more about how you can work with me, please visit katiedeming.com. You can find additional resources in the episode show notes linked below, and remember to join us next week as we continue to explore more holistic approaches to healing. Until then, this is Dr. Katie Deming, reminding you that just like me, you were born to heal.